want to thank you very much and to recognize President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo and the National Open University of Nigeria for the great honor you have done in selecting me to join you here today as chairperson of this occasion. I'm sure that you had a whole host of possible persons that you could have chosen from, and so I deem it an honor to have been asked to come here to Abuja today to chair this occasion. I believe that the invitation is not based just on my person, but is also a recognition of the widely held acknowledgement of the brotherly and sisterly relations that exist between the people of Ghana and Nigeria. It being a ceremony to inaugurate the Olusegun Obasanjo Good Governance and Development Center at the National Open University of Nigeria, I'm convinced that your invitation is another testament of the contribution that countries like Ghana and others in the sub-region have made towards the stabilization and consolidation of democracy on the African continent. Chief OBJ, as as we like to call him, has many other accolades. Sometimes we call him OBJ of Africa, and is widely acknowledged. But most of us, out of respect and reverence, like to continue to call him Baba. And I believe that there can have been no better person to name this center on good governance and development after, because it's not only the moving spirit behind the establishment of the Open University of Nigeria, he also superintended its realization after it had, as the Vice Chancellor said, after it had been established in the 80s. It went defunct until he came back into office. At the time that he was head of state, he ensured that the university came into fruition. But also, President Obasanjo has the unique advantage and privilege of having straddled at least two eras of Africa's leadership. Of course, we all know that Africa had three distinct periods of leadership. The post-independence, which was largely superintended by our founders, the founders of our nation who brought our countries out of colonial domination into independence. And then we had a distinct era in the 70s and 90s where most African countries had military rulers. And then we have the current situation where we have openly, freely, and fairly elected governments. President Obasanjo, as we know, was the head of state in the period of military rule, and at the same time had the advantage later to become the president of a constitutional government that ruled according to a constitution and respected the rule of law and human rights. And so there couldn't have been a better person who has an understanding of governance other than President Olusegun Obasanjo, and I congratulate you for this decision. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take away the beef in whatever speech our guest speaker would make, but I'll just mention a few things that I think that the Center on Good Governance and Development will have to be dealing with. We in Africa have largely completed the fight for democratic consolidation. And several times I go to international fora, and I've often been asked the question, when will the African Spring take place? Because the Arab Spring had taken place with a lot of violence and overthrow of governments. And I've often told our international partners that the African Spring has taken place already, because the transition into constitutional governance, respect for human rights and rule of law, and the large scale participation of our people in governance has happened, and it started from the early 90s when majority of our countries made a return to constitutional rule, and now free and fair elections are the norm in Africa. And so we're not expecting an African spring where there are explosions to increase people's participation in governance or to overthrow some dictators. Largely, many African countries are having regular elections, and I think that that is assisting in the dividend that we are enjoying. But this center would have to research into many unresolved challenges of leadership in Africa. And that includes, I was reading recently, the paradox of democracy and development. Should you have development before democracy, or you have democracy before development, or you have democracy and development side by side? Countries in which democratic participation is curtailed seem to be developing faster than others that have wider participation in governance. Because in countries that have development as a priority, democracy plays second fiddle. The decision-making process is shortened. And so it's easier to take decisions, and therefore development is tangible all the time because fewer people are taking the decisions. But then it means that the larger population must give up some of its rights of free speech and free expression and several of the other rights that we're used to. At the same time, you fight for democratic participation, but then because of the levels in which decision-making has to go through, you find that it becomes an impediment to rapid development. And so decision-making, the president, has some powers, but he has Congress, he has Senate, he has House of Representatives. They can throw things out, and he has to reintroduce them. And so for a single project that you have to undertake, it takes 4, 5, 6 years when it would have been completed in 2 years in some other country. And so what is the balance between democracy and development? How do we get it right so that our people maintain their right to participate in governance, but at the same time we are able to maintain development at the pace that will transform their lives? These are some of the questions this center would have to research into. Africa has the fastest growing population. And so what is going to be the relationship between this fast growing population and governance? It's also an issue we need to look at, because Africa's population is more than 1.2 billion, and soon Africa is going to become one of the biggest populated continents. It means you need more schools, you need more hospitals, you need more roads, you need more bridges, you need to expand social services. And so it means that we must have accelerated economic transformation to be able to stay ahead of the demographic curve. And so what's the nexus between population growth and governance? And what kind of leadership do we need to create that transformation in order that we're able to keep our people, give our people a decent and dignified existence? There are many other things. There's the social media and governance. Government no longer controls the media space. And so while you're trying to communicate with the people what government policy is, they are watching Africa Magic and other things, or they are on Facebook and Twitter and others. How does governance take advantage of the changing new media to be able to continue to communicate with the people and be able to provide them with enough information so that they're able to participate actively in their own governance? These are all issues I think this center would have to look at. There's much responsibility on this center in respect of rural-urban migration. In my own country, Ghana, when we started at independence, we had 28% of people living in urban centers and the remaining living in rural areas. Today, we have 53% urban and 47% rural. So it means that largely our population is becoming urban. It's going to put strong stress on governance in urban centers in terms of provision of water, utility services, keeping our urban centers clean, sanitation and all that. And so these are all areas I think that this center would be very helpful in coming up with the results that leadership can pick on and begin to stay one step ahead of it all. And I've always said there's much responsibility on this country, much responsibility on Nigeria, because in every region of the world that has seen transformational development, a lot of the time it has been driven by a particular country. And so if you go to Southeast Asia, it is Japan's emergence as a strong economic power that has pulled all the other Southeast Asian countries forward. The investments that Japanese businesses have done, building Toyota plants, Mitsubishi plants in various countries, that has continued to drive that area. The emergence of China has also helped the process of Asian economic development. And so I say in Africa, there's responsibility on the three largest economies, and these are South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt, to be the drivers of regional economic development. And so how we achieve this are some of the things that the center can look at. Because if Nigeria gets it right, it can drag the whole of West Africa along. And I've always said that Nigeria should lead the integration of the West African sub-region. Because Nigeria has nothing to fear from Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire or anything. Our economies are far smaller than Nigeria's economy. And it's in Nigeria's interest to open up the markets so that we can create the kind of economy that promotes intra-West African trade.
Your Excellency, President Yamaha, not only should I acknowledge your presence, let me also thank you most sincerely for taking all the trouble to be here. There is no doubt that the objectives and mission of the center address the needs of the Nigerian society today, and is to deepen democracy, promote good governance, and attain desired level of human development, growth, and progress. I welcome and commend the initiative of the establishment of the center. One of the crises of development in Nigeria is the weaknesses of our institutions, along with leadership deficit. I have been assured that this center will not fall into this crisis, as the National Open University of Nigeria has appointed a professor with vast international experience in governance and development policy and practice, having worked in the UN and ECOWAS to head the center.